everyone, and welcome back to a brand new segment. I'm incredibly excited to be bringing this to you. It's taken quite a bit of work to put it all together, but following on from the Cactus Minute, which was a fairly popular series that I put together, a lot of the feedback that I got from that was that you guys wanted more information, more in-depth look. But obviously that format wasn't really suited to a more in-depth look. The whole idea behind it was just very quick segments, something to watch on your lunch break. So this new series that I put together for you guys is called Cactus Spotlight. Basically what it's going to be is a brand new series where we take an in-depth look at one particular type of cacti or cactus. I share with you what I know about them, their growing requirements and all that sort of fun stuff. So to kick off things, I really wanted to start with Gymnocalycium, which is one of my top 3 favourite cacti of all time. So they are a South American cactus, mostly found in northern Argentina and also in southern Bolivia. There's also some scattered populations in southern Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay. So that's basically where they come from originally. Now in their natural habitat, it's mostly well, a mixture of different sort of microclimates, I guess you could say, but dry forest is one of them. Xerophytic prairies. Now if you're not sure what xerophytic means, it basically, to put it bluntly, is it basically means plants that have developed to exist in very dry conditions. I'll put the actual word up here if you want to Google it and have a bit more of an in-depth look at what that actually means. Now the soil that they grow in, it varies greatly, anywhere from clay to sand, also to stony ground as well. So there's quite a range. There's a lot of Gymnocalycium. I don't know the exact number, I think there's around 100 or so maybe more recognised varieties, and then there's all the sub-genres underneath that. So that's just a little bit of background of where they come from and where they like to live. Most of the habitats that they exist in, the rainfall occurs mostly in the warmer months, which makes sense in the terms of the way that we grow cacti, in that we water them when it's warm, being summer and spring and part of autumn depending on your climate. And then in winter we give them a little bit of a drought and a dry out and let them have their rest. So it is winter at the moment now. None of my guys have been watered in 3, maybe 4 months now, coming up to that, so they're a bit shrunken and some of them are showing signs of stress from no water, but they're all doing okay. They do have a very high drought tolerance, as do most cacti for that matter. So they're going to be all right. They're just having their little rest. Now, if we're looking at the soil mix, so what I use for my Gymnocalycium, if I can find it, I'll always put in pumice, quite large pieces. That's about as big as they get, and then they go down into even smaller pieces again. What I also put in there is a type of rock. I don't know if it's a type of rock, it's what it's referred to as. It's called aggregate, which is basically used for drainage purposes, but it's very, very small. I don't know the exact type of rock that it is, but I put that in there. Also scoria or volcano rock, which is this stuff here. Lava rock is also, I think it's called. It's called a few different things, so I use the small pieces of that. I put in sand. Now I use paving sand, which is a product that's sold in Bunnings, but I think play sand is also probably quite close to that as well. I put in potting soil, just the cheap stuff. Now I have copped a little bit of heat for using the cheap stuff, and I've had some people sort of say to me, oh, you know, you've got to use the good stuff. Look, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I don't see the value in it. I really, really don't. For me, the potting soil is just an organic component to the soil mix, so not about to change anytime soon. But hey, if you want to use the expensive stuff, by all means go ahead, and if it's working for you, well, why not? The other thing that I put in there is core peat. You'll have heard me mention that a number of times. It's a coconut product. It comes in a brick, which is about that big, and about that thick. You soak it in water, it puffs up, and then it just sort of forms like this mulchy sort of stuff, with very, very tiny little particles. Now I do put a little bit more organic matter into the Gymnocalycium mix than I do for a lot of the other cacti, so for things that are rot prone, Erioses, Astrophytum, Copiopoa, those sorts of things. So I do put a little bit more, but in saying that, it is still an incredibly rocky mix. So I'll just show you the top of the pot. Now the finer particles do trickle down over time, but that's pretty much the mix as it runs all the way through. So I like to keep it quite rocky, and the reason that I do that is because it's very easy to put water into a mix, but it's essentially impossible to take it out if you overdo it. So I'd much rather my mix dry out very, very quickly and have to water 2 or 3 times in a week than it not dry out quickly enough, and then you start getting problems. For the growth rate for Gymnocalycium, there is going to be some variation, obviously, between the different types, but some are very, very slow, and then others are very, very fast. Overall, however, I'd put them at a moderate to fast growth rate, you know, in comparison, or looking at sort of cacti in general. They do grow quite reasonably, but you're going to have the slow ones. One of the slowest that I know of is Gymnocalycium veterii, which is an incredibly beautiful cactus. I don't have one. I've tried to grow it from seed about a dozen times, and I have failed every single time. So I don't know why. It's just, maybe I'm just not supposed to have one. I've got one little seedling just holding on for dear life, and I hope that it hangs on just a little bit longer until we get to the warmer weather and I can graft it, because I really, really want one. But anyways, that's one of the slower growing ones that I know of. Now in terms of their form, how they grow, they are mostly a solitary plant, sort of like this, just one little unit, but you will have some that will offset quite freely. One of the ones that does that the most is Gymnocalycium damsii, which is a relatively common cactus, which is this guy here. Now, I don't like the look of all the pups because they grow out of the areoles, which are these little spike points. I don't like the way it looks. So when they pop up, I pull them off straight away. I much prefer that aesthetic. But of course, if you're wanting to make more, it's great. Another one that does offset a lot is Gymnocalycium anistii, I think it's called. I don't have that one either. But so they're the ones that I know of that sort of offset a lot. The other one is Gymnocalycium brucei, which is this guy here. Now I actually leave these ones on because I don't mind the aesthetic of it. As you can see, they sort of grow from around the base, and I think it's quite attractive. It's more of a clumping look than sort of suckering off around the top. So I think that looks quite nice. And if you're wanting to propagate one of these, you just push one of the little pups off, wait a week, pop it into the soil, and then away you go. They're incredibly, incredibly easy to grow, and I'd recommend them for anyone just starting out, right the way through until to experienced growers. It's a big family, so there's plenty of interest there. They will mostly grow into like a barrel shape, but then you'll have some that'll grow into a sort of like a flattened disc. And I think one of the finest examples of that is Gymnocalycium platigona, which is this guy here. Absolutely gorgeous. Very, very few spines, and they're quite flattened towards the body as well, as you can see there. So you can see the overall height is very low, but beautiful, beautiful cactus. And this might be a good substitute for those who aren't allowed to grow Lophophora, but you like the aesthetic of them. It's not a Lophophora, no, but it does have that sort of aesthetic of sort of like a button look. So that could be a nice substitute. And that. And then the other one that does grow into that sort of fashion is this guy here, which is Gymnocalycium pseudo-raganessii. Now I believe that this guy has had his name changed, but I'll just stick with this name because that's what I know him as. As you can see, more pronounced spines, but still that really, really nice sort of flattened look. And the flattened ones will generally have a taproot as well. But then you can see, I'm not going to pull out too many because the video will go too long, but there's lots and lots of different growth forms. I mean, if we look at this one in comparison to the Pseudo-Raganesii, I mean, they're worlds apart, but plenty of interest in this family. Just pop these back. Now, in terms of the root structure that they have, the root structure varies from, I guess, what you could consider to be a traditional root system, being a fibrous root system where you'll have the main plant here, and then the roots will come off in lots of little like fingers, hairs, and out they go. But then there's also some that will have a taproot. Now, if you're not familiar with what a taproot looks like, it basically looks like a carrot, although it's not orange. They're usually white. Sometimes they have a yellow tinge to them. What I would recommend is planting a Gymnocalycium into a deeper pot. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell you which ones have a taproot and which ones don't. My memory's not that good. But if they do have a taproot and you can afford them a deeper pot, it just means that the taproot develops a lot more nicely. If you can't, it's not the end of the world. All that's going to happen is, if you put it into a shallow pot, is the taproot will come down, it will hit the bottom of the pot, and it'll spray out to the side and sometimes wrap around, depending on how long you take to repot them. It's not detrimental, it's not going to be the end of the world, but I just think the taproot looks a lot nicer when they're growing straight down. Now, their sizes, generally they are quite small, although there are some that grow extremely large, sort of more into a very, very large barrel. Well, the main one that's known to grow large is Saglione. That grows quite large, although mine's very, very small, so it's not a very good example of that. But mostly they're a sort of small to medium-sized cactus. They're not going to grow enormously, which is good, because then you can have quite a lot of them without them taking up a lot of room. So great for people who are tight on space. They do flower readily. They're very, very easy to get to flower. And they also flower from a very young age. The flowers all look very, very similar in their form, but the colours vary wildly. So you can have anything from a nice pure white all the way through into a very, very rich crimson red. A lot of the flowers that I know, however, have very nice dusky sort of, I guess you could call them antique colours, with nice dusky sort of, I hate to use the word brown, but browns through to greys and pinks and things like that, and they're really, really attractive. Sometimes you'll have a solitary flower, other times it'll be dual, as in two of them. The Mahanovichis, they will generally put up quite a display, so maybe 4, 5, 6 or more flowers in a big bunch. Very, very attractive, and definitely eye-catching and really nice to see. For watering, they are a little bit more on the thirsty side, so I don't consider Gymnocalycium to be rot prone at all. What will happen, however, generally what will happen if you overwater them, is that rather than them actually rotting and just dying, they will split. So this guy here is a good example of that. As you can see there, he's got a big gnarly split. So it's not attractive, but it's also not a death sentence. So he'll grow out of that eventually, and then that'll be that. So that's generally what's going to happen, is rather than them actually dying, they'll just split. And just put him back into his little spot. So there's two sort of regimes that I follow for watering Gymnocalycium. Now the first one is going to be during the growing season, which is late spring through to early autumn, and that's where I'll generally water 2 to 3 times per week, which does sound like a lot, absolutely, but considering the risk that I'm running is a split versus fully dying, I'll take that risk. The other time is the lead up to the growing season and the wind down from the growing season. So in the wind up, so just before the growing season, we'd be looking at late winter through to early spring. I'd be looking at introducing water every 10 to 14 days, and then again at the end of the season, so we're sort of looking at autumn through to early winter. It is going to depend greatly, however, on your climatic conditions. So you might find that you're having a warm autumn or a cooler autumn, and then you would just adjust accordingly to that. So if it's on the cooler side, scale the water back. If it's warmer, you can probably push it up a little bit more. These guys will actually hold on to a little bit more water inside their bodies when it's cold without any damage, a little bit better than something else. So something like an astrophytum or an Eriosis, where, or Copiopoa even, they take a very, very long time for their water levels to reduce, and so I obviously change that so that I can make sure that they're not holding so much and there's not a higher risk of rotting. The Gymnocalycium, though, they'll actually hold on to a little bit more with little to no risk, so they're good in that respect. When with the food, or fertilizer I should say rather, I feed these guys once per year, and that is my rule across the board for all cacti. Once per year. If I think they're too bloated or I overfed the year before, no food that year. Now there's one in here which I don't remember exactly which one it was, but he actually ended up having flowers coming down from inside here, and I'll know when I go through them one by one in my own time. That guy will not get food this year, and I covered it off in the cactus fertilization video, was that he was overfed, and that's why there was those unnatural flowers coming out, and I don't want to see that. It's not healthy, it's not good for the cactus, and it's not attractive. So that one won't be getting any food this year, and I'll probably overall wind down the food to even less than what I usually give, just because last year I went a little bit too heavy. In terms of problems, they're very, very few and far between. They have high resistance to pests and diseases. They don't rot very easily. They're pretty tough plants, and they're also incredibly forgiving. So if you mistreat them, if you underwater, overwater, over-fertilize, whatever it might be, they're going to bounce back in usually around 12 to 18 months, as opposed to some cacti that you could be looking at 2 to 5 years before they come good. So these guys here, absolutely incredible. You can mistreat them and they'll usually forgive you, although be nice to them, because they're a pretty cool cactus and one of my favourites. Some of the common ones that you're going to see most likely in your garden centre is your Gymnocalycium mahanovici. There's quite a few different varieties of the mahanovici. This one here is my one. He's quite bleached because he was in full sun, and they don't like full sun. Gymnocalycium, for the most part, like a fairly shaded position. Some of them will tolerate getting blasted by the sun, but mostly they're going to look nicer if you can afford them a little bit of protection. So this guy here is one that you'll commonly see in garden centres, and the bodies are usually much darker, more purple with highlights of pink. Absolutely gorgeous, and they're incredibly easy to look after, which is one of the reasons they're very commonly grown commercially. So that's one that you'll see there. This is also from the same family that you will have seen moon cactus. Now they're the ones that are bright red, bright yellow and bright pink. I'm not a fan of them. I think I just don't find them aesthetically pleasing, but they're one of the cactus that a lot of people start out with. I won't go into the full history, but basically the red variety was discovered in Japan in the 40s. It was one seedling that stood out, and so the grower picked it out, grafted it, and then from there, that's when it took off. So that's the start of that one. But they're the moon cactus, and I don't own any of those. Now the other one that you'll most likely see as well is Baldianum, which is this guy here. Mine's a little bit dehydrated. And these guys are really interesting in the fact that their flower colour can vary dramatically. So I can have this guy here, I've got one that looks exactly the same as this, but this guy's got a pink flower, for instance, and his cousin will have the red flower. So even a cool little extension off of going off the whole family is that, hey, that's not very nice, is that you could even go as far as to have a collection just of Baldianum with just that particular flower, with, you know, with all the different flower colours, the pinks, the reds, the whites, everything like that, just contained within that one variety, which is pretty special, I think. So I think I've got three colours, 2 or 3 colours, I don't know. So overall, they're an incredibly easy plant to look after. The main points that I would suggest for growing them successfully would be generous with the water, give them a little bit of protection, they'll thank you for it, and other than that, just sit back and watch them grow. They're so incredibly easy to grow, and very rewarding as well. I'd like to say that I could tell you which one's my favourite, but I just can't do it, because one day I'll walk out here and that one will be my favourite, and the next day that one will be. But probably the one that I really appreciate is the one we saw a little while ago, which is Gymnocalycium platigona. I just think he's incredibly interesting, and a really good looking plant. The level of spination will vary greatly. You've seen that platigona has very few spines, and they're quite pressed against the body. And then the other ones which have a lot more spines. So for instance, this guy here is Gymnocalycium schnickendanzii. Heavy spines. But even with all that, even the heavy spine ones, they're pretty friendly, they got a good attitude. Growing them from seed is not too difficult. They're probably one of the easier ones to grow from seed. Some of them, however, Mahanavici specifically, is incredibly slow. I've got some that are, I don't know, probably 6 or 9 months old now. And they're tiny, they just will not grow. I don't know what to do. But other ones, on the other hand, will grow quite readily. And I've got some here. Here's some I prepared earlier. So just a few in here. I've got Reductum and then Gibbosum. So Reductum's going to be on this side and Gibbosum's on that side. These guys are from the last growing season, so we're coming up to probably around 6 or 7 months old. They're not the biggest. I didn't have them in the best conditions to begin with. But they've got their they're starting to develop adult characteristics now. So the skin has thickened up, and they'll start taking a little bit more light. I water them throughout winter. You're going to lose a few, but overall the growth rate, or the growth that you get, is worth that risk. And then I'll just show you lastly this little punnet here. So I've got Ferrarii here, which I'm incredibly excited about, as I do not have this variety. And then just a few others, you probably won't be able to see them too well. But Ferrarii is over here, and they're already looking incredibly interesting. And I think there's Shearii, and there's one more which I'm not even going to try and say it because I'm going to stumble over it, but here's the other variety that's in there. I don't even know how to say it, but I only have one of those actually. There's only one tiny little seedling who's not looking too good. But anyways, so raising them from seed, I've done a video on that before. It's pretty much the same method. Put them into, sterilize the soil, pop the seeds in the soil, put them into a bag, and away you go. Realistically, if I had left those guys in the bag a little bit longer, they'd be a lot bigger by now, but there was some algal problems, so I took them out. Anyways, I think that's everything. This is the first episode of this series, so obviously I'll be ironing out bugs as the series go on, and I do hope you enjoy the more in-depth look. If there's any aspects or elements that you want me to focus on a little bit more, please let me know. Obviously, I definitely appreciate all of your feedback that you guys give to me, because you guys are the ones watching the videos, so they need to work for you. But finishing up from here, I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a tour of my Gymnocalycium. I don't have all of them labelled. I go through stages of on and off labelling plants, so some of them I don't know what they are. But my view on labelling at the end of the day is that I grow the plants that I like, and so I don't care whether it's a Mahanavici or whether it's a Horstii or what its name is. That doesn't make any difference to me at all. I grow the ones that I like the look of. And I know there are some purists out there that want the exact name and the location and the seed source and all the rest of it. I'm just a natural gardener. I like growing my plants, and what they're called doesn't really bother me at all. But anywho, I'll take you on a little bit of a tour with some music, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Alright everyone, thanks for watching, and as always, happy gardening. Bye.